Hi, students. This video is an introduction to your next essay assignment, which is essay 4, the research paper. The written assignment and rubric is posted on Canvas, and I'm just going to go over it. For your fourth paper for this class, you're going to write a research paper on a social issue related to the literature we've read this semester. For this essay, you are required to do outside research, which should include, at a minimum, at least 6 outside sources which you find through the GCC library. That is not counting the material we read in the course, though those articles, they're not really articles, poems or stories or plays may certainly be included on your works cited page and cited in the paper. But could also include reputable websites. At least one of your sources should be a primary source. A primary source is just a first-person account of something, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So I've designed this assignment to be kind of broad because I want you to be able to kind of follow your interests. But basically, the central question you should explore in this essay is, to what extent is this social issue raised by a work of literature we read still important today? So when I say a social issue, I mean like, whether workers should be part of unions, that could be considered a social issue. For something like, To His Coy Mistress, maybe To His Coy Mistress isn't the best example. My Last Duchess kind of deals with partner abuse. Sweat also deals with sexism in unions. What the Living Do sort of touches on homophobia in medical care. We'll talk about that. A Virginia Woolf essay we're going to read in a couple weeks deals with sexism. So lots of different issues. And what I'm interested in you doing in this research essay is thinking about how relevant the issues raised in these literary works are today, whether they're still relevant. Are they still important issues, or have we solved these issues? So I think the topic of the essay will get clearer as I describe some of the possible topics you might explore. So the central question is, to what extent is this social issue raised by a work of literature we read still important today? If it is no longer important, explain why. If it's still important, explain why. It's perfectly okay and encouraged to say it is both important and not important, or that the issue has changed, and to explain how it's changed. We're kind of using the work of literature, or the works of literature we've read, as like conversation starters, and as a starting point for you to explore the topic as it exists in our world today. You're welcome to pick a social issue not represented in the suggested topics below, but please run it by me first, just to give you some ideas. Here are some possible topics. So obviously, Sweat, the main characters in Sweat are all members of a labor union. And one thing I was thinking about might be interesting to research is, right now in the United States, companies who don't want to, move overseas, like the factory in Sweat did, are dealing with workers who want to form a union to fight for better pay and benefits. And there's a lot of what's called union busting going on, where companies are trying to keep workers from voting to form a union, because it's going to, their expenses are going to go up if they have to pay their workers more money. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot there that it'll be easy to find sources on union busting right now. There was just a big union effort in Alabama among Amazon workers. Also, John Oliver, who has a show on HBO, recently did a long segment on his TV show about union busting. And there's a link to it on YouTube, which I included in the assignment. You could use that, his segment on it, as a source, and it might help you kind of think about that topic. And then you might think about, how does that relate to the issues raised in Sweat? How is union busting in any way similar morally to what the factory did in Sweat, the factory management? Do you see any connections? Another thing, the characters in Sweat are facing incredible challenges, being laid off from their jobs. Chris and Jason are struggling to develop resilience at the end of that play. You might, and they're also struggling to deal with their shame. You might look at, what does the research show about what shame is and how it can negatively affect our ability to heal and move forward. There are a couple of TED Talks by Brene Brown, which could be sources for that topic, and I gave you a link to them. You also might research and write about what scientists have learned about how to develop resilience. In Sweat, Oscar, these are all just different ideas. I'm just giving you different ideas. You don't, just so you have a lot of things you can explore. Oscar implies that he and his father are not allowed into the union because of racism. You could research and write about the history of racism and sexism in unions, but that's a huge topic. So if you wanted to just pick one topic that's kind of the right size for a 6 to 8 page paper, you might think about one, battle against racism and sexism in unions. We kind of have one going on in Los Angeles right now. Many people are accusing the LA firefighters union of being sexist. They've been accused of creating a hostile workplace for female firefighters. And I included a link to an LA Times article about that, which you could use as a source. In What the Living Do, Marie Howe writes about her brother John, who died of AIDS. And the video we watched about AIDS showed how homophobia kind of interfered with AIDS patients getting good medical care in the beginning. There are a lot of topics you could research here, but here are a few. What role did ACT UP play in finding good treatment for AIDS patients? It was an activist organization. What does the data show about the ways racism affects health, racism or homophobia or sexism affect healthcare, and what steps are being taken to make healthcare more equitable? Is racism a factor in why more people of color are dying from COVID-19? We know that the death rates for COVID are higher among communities of color, so that might be interesting. The New York Times has published a ton of stuff about all those topics, so you should be able to find some good sources, and I can help you if you need help. Many of the works we've read this semester have dealt with death and have encouraged us to look at death not as something scary and dreadful, but as something that we might face with courage, peace, and even curiosity. Research and write about the hospice movement and how it is encouraging terminally ill patients and their families to consider the concept of the good death, and how it is challenging mainstream views at the end of life, much like several of the works we read in class do. In a couple of weeks, we're going to read an essay by Virginia Woolf. In that essay, she argues that women simply do not have the same access to resources and power that men have. You could research and write about an issue related to the condition of women in America today. To what extent have conditions for women improved in the last 100 years? To what extent do women still face greater obstacles than men? To consider these questions, you might focus your research on one of the following topics: the fight for equal pay for equal work, the term rape culture and what it means, and what evidence exists that it is real or not. You might also relate this topic to Tu is Quae Mistress, or domestic abuse. You might relate this topic to My Last Duchess, and or what research reveals about how heterosexual couples, married couples, divide up housework. If you're thinking about exploring the topic of rape culture, I really encourage you to look up the story of Chanel Miller. She was the woman who was raped by a Stanford student in Northern California. And the Stanford student got a very, very light sentence. So it was a very controversial case that got a lot of attention. There's a really great victim impact statement from her that you can find. I put the link here. That's a perfect example of a primary source. She's somebody who's been a victim of sexual violence, and she writes about it in a first person I perspective. That would be a good primary source for that topic. Virginia Woolf's essay also suggests that we have inequality because not all people have the same access to resources. There's been some interesting research recently about the universal basic income and this idea that everybody should be guaranteed a certain amount of money. And they did a really interesting study that got a lot of attention in Stockton, California, where they gave people who had very little money, they just gave them $500 a month and just looked at what they did with it and how much it improved their situation. You could research and write about the Stockton study and what its findings suggest about Virginia Woolf's argument. You might also write about a similar study that is starting up in Los Angeles right now. You could even, apply to be part of it if you're interested. You can find out a little bit about the Stockton study in this link I gave you here, and you can use it as one of your resources. So those are just a bunch of ideas. Things you might want to research and think about. Well, this assignment is designed to give you some freedom in the selection of your topic. Whatever topic you choose, you should design an essay that in some way explores a social issue raised by a work of literature we've read and discuss whether that social issue is still important today. In your essay, you should also draw connections between what you learned from your research and the work of literature we read that connects to the social issue you're writing about. And I will give you a lot of guidance about how to do that, probably starting next week. While there are many ways you may approach your topic, in most cases, whatever your topic or your purpose, the following conventions of formal writing will probably make that purpose clearer. You want to have an introduction. You want to have distinct supporting sections. You do not need to worry about keeping everything in a 5-paragraph essay format. This is a 6 to 8 page paper. You are likely going to have many paragraphs, 12 or 15, but you should have distinct supporting sections, and we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. A conclusion, and you must have a works cited page. I will give you a lot of guidance about that. The next thing you need to know about this assignment that's really important is that your grade on this assignment is not just based on the final paper you turn in. Your grade is built from a bunch of preliminary assignments that you turn in. The first preliminary assignment will be due next Tuesday, November 23rd. That's you showing me 6 tentative sources on your topic, including one primary source, in the form of a works cited page. That's 5% of your grade on this paper. Then you're going to turn in annotated bibliography. That's another 5%. A free write and or list of what you've learned about your topic is another 5%. A tentative outline of your essay is due on Wednesday, December 1st. That's another 5%. A typed rough draft of your introduction and first supporting section, that's 5%. And then your complete typed rough draft is due on Sunday, December 5th. And you get credit for it only if you also meet with me for 15 minutes to talk about it, sometime between Monday, December 6th and Monday, December 13th. That's 15% of your grade on this paper. And then your final draft is due by 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, December 15th. Oops, I've got 2 11:59s there. I got to fix that. And that's 60% of your grade on this paper. The paper should be 6 to 8 pages long, not including the works cited page. So I always say to students, the key for success on this assignment, many times when I first assign the research paper, students get really stressed and freaked out. But I really do think the secret is to just focus on the first step, then the second step, then the third step. You've got a list of all the steps here. I'm going to give you lots of guidance on each of these steps. So you won't be on your own. I'm going to give you a lot of help. If you just keep focusing on the next step you need to complete and doing that step as thoroughly and well as you can, you will eventually get to a strong research essay. So try not to think about it all at once. Try to just think about the next thing, items that are due, and reach out for help on them if you need them, if you need help. Just want to see if I can. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's most of what I want to say just as an introduction to this essay. Please keep watching all the other videos about this assignment. There'll be a video on how to use a database. There'll be a video on how to write a works cited page. There'll be a video on how to write an annotated bibliography and how to format a work hanging indent, all that kind of stuff. And of course, if you're struggling, come see me. I do Zoom office hours, Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, 10 to noon. I'm available outside of those times too, if you make an appointment. So keep in touch, let me know what you need, and I'll be happy to help you.